So I'm going to start with, for my purposes, this is how I define open adoption. It'll of course be a little bit different for you, and take what you like and leave the rest from my speech today for what fits for you culturally and what doesn't. But for my purposes, this is my definition of open adoption. Okay, direct knowledge of the other via fully disclosed accurate information. Of course, ongoing meetings. Social media is the new thing, and since I'm a Luddite, I can't help you much with that, but you'll be having lots of conversations around Facebook and direct contact that way. Other kinds of updates, but this last one's important, the option to renegotiate and change the relationship. By the way, several people have talked today, and as well as my meetings yesterday and all of my conversations with Melissa, all of the thousands of open adoptions that I have worked on and will continue to work on, in my context, they're not legally enforceable. Okay, so in your context, you have the great advantage that you will have legal backup for the agreements people make. That is helpful, I think, but I'm here to testify to you it's not necessary. Okay, because as we've been discussing at our table here with our ethics expert, you cannot legislate good heart, good morals, and commitment. Those things either exist or they don't in the client. Now, there are things you can do as the helpers, there are things you can do as the midwives in this situation to help your clients get there and to help your clients understand what constitutes good morality in this situation. So this whole business of being able to negotiate and change is a foundational brick that I use with all clients, that whatever you agree to, that's fine, but please understand it will change as the child's needs change, but also as people change. Open adoption is not, this is important in my world, maybe in yours, shared parenting. I think, in fact, one of your clients just said that on the video. Okay, so the first thing I have to do with clients and whoever I'm convincing that open adoption is the righteous path is help them understand that it's not shared parenting. Okay, because in an adoption, the rights and responsibilities, the joys and the challenges of parenting are given over to the everyday parents. Okay, that's what's being given over. Not the right to love the kid, but the right to parent. So it's not shared parenting. It's not blurred roles and responsibilities. Okay, I consider that part of my midwifery job here is to help people understand the roles and responsibilities that go with each side of this equation, and I take that serious. It's not intrusive to the family unit. These are, again, the common fears. I don't know about here. I have suspect it'll be the same. But the common fears of the carers are that somehow they will not get to have the sovereignty of their own family. And that's a term I use with them when I work with them. That is what you get to have. When you're an adoption-built family or a permanent conservator family, you get to have the sovereignty of your family unit. Open adoption is not dangerous or risky. I do a lot of work directly with clients still, so this is a big issue for me to first help them identify what it is they're afraid of and how they think they can protect that, which I assume is the same here, that people still think that they can protect their family from danger and their children from danger if they don't give the other people their phone number. Or at least in my state, that would be a common thing they would think, that if I don't disclose my address and phone number to you, you won't find it out. So some of my first fun work is to say, how long do you think it'll take me to find out your name and phone number if I really want to? Okay, open adoption is not dangerous or risky. The profile of a relinquishing parent, a parent who cannot be an everyday parent because of their challenges, is different than the profile of a stalker or a kidnapper. So, again, a lot of work with people up front about that. And open adoption is not confusing for children. This is the most common criticism by outsiders when they, your mother-in-law, when they hear that you're thinking about doing an open adoption, is that you're going to confuse the child. So again, those are the things we're going to get rid of. So these are the 6 foundational bricks that you will need to stand strong on if you want to do this work well. Okay, and we're going to go through these. But you can see that when I work with professionals who want to open up their adoption practice, I say, here's where you need to spend your money and your continuing education hours. Because when you are firm in these things as the helper, you will be able to help your clients. And if you're not firm in these things, you will not be able to help your clients very well navigate what they have to do open adoptions well. Adoption provides the legal and psychological security for both the child and the parental units. I have noticed today, forgive me when I'm offensive. I am a Texan after all. I have noticed today a certain reluctance around the word adoption. It appears to me there's a certain need in the conversations in Australia to make adoption this last possible option. Or maybe I'm mishearing it, but that's how I've been hearing it, and I would love for that to disappear. And that adoption can be talked about as just one of the options from an early time, because in my opinion, adoption provides that permanency and a family of one's own that children need. As a matter of fact, generally when we do kinship placements in the United States, those are also adoptions. They don't have to be, but I believe that adoption provides a symbol and a very real legal connection between the everyday parents and the child that's beneficial to everybody. So that even when grandparents are caring for children in my state, they're almost always going to do an adoption. But what I have heard in Australia, I would say this common practice of continuing foster care status for children that allows even the specter that the biological relative might return, I believe that creates and then perpetuates the child's feeling that they are unworthy. I believe that will create much more of a risk that the child will feel less than their peers in school or their social group, because they are not, in fact, belonging permanently to a family. And I know that it will invite children to not put down roots in that family. And these are serious concerns. And I also know that it will breed poor entitlement on the part of the everyday parents that are caring for the child. And these are not in the best interest of children. Okay, so again, I said we do a little thing on attachment because I believe this is one of the 6 bricks you better be standing on, is a real understanding of attachment. Okay, protecting secure attachments equals mental health for children and adults, in my opinion. Protecting attachment, and of course, in foster care work, well, you're in the business of breaking attachments. In some ways, you can think of it that way. Or again, I like those things, shocking lines that get people's attention. You're in the business of breaking attachments. Okay, well, we accept that in this imperfect world. But you, as a worker, and certainly those of you in administrative positions, need to be paying much more attention to the fact that protecting a secure attachment, in my opinion, equals mental health. And the lack of it will equal difficulties, as Michael talked about so eloquently this morning. And moving children in and of itself causes serious attachment damage, period. Okay, again, I don't really know your system here in terms of transitions or moving children within the foster care system, but you have my personal guarantee that it will teach the child that adults cannot be trusted. Not to treat attachment with a lot of respect is going to affect that child's ability to be somebody's spouse or somebody's mama or daddy, but it's also going to affect their ability to be somebody's employee. Because it's going to affect all their trust-based relationships. Looking through the eyes and the experience of the child is the guiding principle of all the decisions that should be made in child welfare. And I always say, and this is what attachment isn't. Secure attachment is not these things, but I want you to look at these because this is where people get off track. Okay, when they're observing a child show some of these other behaviors in relation to a visiting caregiver who's not their everyday parent, they'll say, well, they have a strong bond. And it's not that. The other brick you better understand is entitlement. Okay, another psychobabble term, I suppose, but a very important concept in my work. It's been essential. And entitlement is a feeling of legitimacy, right? Every non-biological parent has to go through an internal psychological journey to get this feeling of legitimacy. If you're parenting through any other journey besides conception and birth, and then your society, I'm sure, has some other rules for that. I'm going to speak about mine. My society says if you're parenting, you better have done it through conception and birth, and you better be heterosexual, and you better be married. Okay, so again, whatever it is here, there's some kind of standard. It doesn't matter that less than half the families of my society would meet that. That doesn't matter. It's still defining this is the best way for a family to be. So if you're anything off of that mark, you're going to go through this claiming your right to be thought of as the child's parent. Because I know that for parents to have a real firm grounding in entitlement, that they need to do 3 things, at least in adoption-built families, I know this for sure, that they need to be able to come to terms with the fact that they're not genetically related to the child. Now, again, I heard some of that talk in this last little video we just saw, and if they have infertility or impaired fertility or medical advice against pregnancy, then it's very specific. It's a specific grieving around those lost children that aren't coming. But even if that's not the case, and people love to rush to tell me how they don't need to do that kind of grief work because they don't have infertility, people love to tell me that. And I love when they tell me that, because we can talk then about, no, what still has to be grieved is that you're not genetically related to that child you love so much. You just cannot imagine your life before they came to your house, et cetera, the way we feel about children once we have attachment to them. And the other thing people have to do is they have to be able to cope with society's constant questions and comments. Okay, so again, I don't know what costume that's going to dress up in here, but I know you've got it, because we're all living in a context. We're asking parents, these carers, to live in a context of a society that sees their family as a little less than, or as saints. Of course, we have that other end of things too for folks. So the other thing people have to do to get a firm sense of entitlement is they have to be able to deal with that attitude, that their family is somehow second best, a little bit less than. And that attitude is going to come to them in the questions and comments people make to their family. Okay, how children create a narrative. Again, I think Penny talked about this earlier when she was up here. Okay. Most children who are in foster care are going to use one of three versions of their narrative. All children are going to write a narrative about their lives. We all wrote a narrative about our lives, okay? But we're talking about children who are in a distorted situation, who are going to be writing a narrative, and here they are. I was given away means that those people didn't want me. I was taken away means I was stolen, right? I was given away. I was taken away, and the last one is I caused it to happen. Which means the child is either all-powerful or despicable. Okay, those are important understandings for you to have if you work with foster kids. They're telling a story right now, today. Your caseload is out there telling a story, and it's got these three themes underneath it. Children are going to explain why this has happened to them. Okay, so let part of your motivation for practicing openness and placement be this. This child will grow up and tell and retell this narrative based on those three understandings and the attitude of their carers toward their bio-clan. And the bio-clan's attitude toward the carers and the system, and depending on how much contact they're having with their bio-clan. But if they're hearing negative things from their bio-clan, that's going to get put into the narrative. And the third thing is the cultural context. So whatever your culture is saying about foster kids and drug addicts and abusers and whatever is going to get incorporated by the child into their narrative. This is the hard one for most of us. Grief and consequences is what I call this one. Foster care and adoption are institutions built on loss. And while there are substantial gains, we must acknowledge consistently what is lost. Yes, you can promote adoption as best for the child while holding the knowledge that there will be terrible losses for the biological clan. Yes, you can. You can hold that with compassion and care, what's happening in the biological family, but never lose sight of who in this journey deserves your highest regard. That's the child. I know your job is complex. I can only say that the reason I can keep doing this after 37 years is I have my eye where it belongs. Somebody's already said this, I think from the panel, that if you'll look through the experience through the eyes of the child, you'll be able to more clearly understand that the sorrow of the adults is tolerable, because the sorrow of the child is not tolerable if we keep our eyes where it belongs. We are child welfare workers. And it's not easy, I know, because again, you have conflicting viewpoints in your work and conflicting regulations that you have to abide by. But how I do it is I just return again and again to the question. I don't ever confuse the need of the biological clan to love the child and know about the child, to maybe see the child. I don't confuse that with, again, what's most important. I honor it, and I protect it as much as I can, but I'm not going to get confused about what matters more. I'm going to tell you how I do it. I'm going to tell you 8 things I do. I don't have a slide for this, but just listen. This is how I continue to do this work and not be an alcoholic or whatever else people do to cope with our work. The first one is I say to myself and to juries, you can't put the kid in the deep freeze, okay? I can't put the child's life on hold while adults work on themselves. That child is busy writing a narrative, and I know it. I don't lose sight of that. And kids will be harmed if they're moved after there's an attachment, period. The only question is how much harm. It is not possible to not harm a child once they have an attachment in the carer family, to move them in any direction. There's going to be a measure of harm. The only question is how much, and how can we mitigate it. I'm not overlooking the benefits of genetic family when I make this little speech to you, by the way. Genetics matter a great deal, and I'm very supportive of open adoption, as you might guess. But that does not trump the issues around attachment, or, as Michael has taught me to call it, felt security. A grand term. I'm really liking knowing that. Okay, item 2, parental love does not equal parenting. This is how I do it. This is the guiding principles I use. They may be highly correlated, of course, parental love and parenting, but parenting is a skill. Loving your child and wanting your child, the things we hear from biological relatives, these in and of themselves do not make me think that the person should parent. Because parenting requires a lot more than love and desire, or the wish for redemption, which is also at play a lot of times with biological clan. Okay. Oh, such clever things I'm having to skip because, I'm going to run out of time. Here's the other thing I do with bio-relatives, or when I consult on a foster care case especially. I talk about Winnicott's idea of good enough parenting, and can these biological relatives be good enough parents? Can they hit that mark? Can they be good enough parents in the next 3 months? Are they sober when they come to visits? Are they attuned to the child? Can they help the child with their distress above their own distress? Those are the things I'm going to be talking about when I'm able to work on a case at the beginning. From day one, counseling with that biological family needs to be child focused, along with the adult issues you're having to help them write their plan of service for, etc. Their parents, their right to be consumed with their own problems has been forfeited. Okay, when we become parents, our rights to be consumed with our own problems is forfeited. Can they be good enough parents even in this initial stage of removal and visitation? Third thing, attachment being a two-way reciprocal street means that the deficits of that biological family may prevent them from being proper parents, from being good enough parents. Their deficits in attachment, which again Michael's talked about this morning. And on top of the biological relatives' attachment wounds and difficulties, of course, then you're layering on the other things you're looking at. We use in the States a lot something called the ACEs study. I don't know if you're using that yet, but it's a phenomenal piece of work that looked at, I can't remember the number, I think 17,000 adults, and identified the 10 factors that are highly correlated with bad outcomes for people as adults. It's not even related to foster care, although a lot of these kids are in foster care. So most of our birth families have a lot of those, and I'm going to look at that with clear eyes. And in your early work with birth family, certainly the question is, can they change rapidly? Can they change rapidly? Because it needs to be rapid. Parenting shouldn't be a series of do-over opportunities, in my opinion. Okay, I've got 2 minutes left to say 6, 7, and 8. 6 is, I am brutally, kindly honest with biological relatives from the beginning that adoption is on the table as an option. I hear in a lot of your work that's not how you're talking, but I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. Because many, many of the cases I work on end up being voluntary. Okay, that's all I want to say about that. And I'm, again, very honest with what's going to be given over in that process. And 7 for me, kids' welfare is best promoted with a permanent, stable, good enough family. And until I can get them in that setting, there's no chance for them to grow roots in attachment. So, again, this is how I do it without becoming crazy. And again, I talk about, this is the 8th one, I talk about voluntary placement in adoption from very early on. And when the way opens, I'll talk about it as an act of parental love. That's not from early sessions necessarily, but when I work with biological relatives, I'm talking about that as an act of parental love. Benefits of open adoption, quickly. Okay. I'm going to say primarily it's going to help children tell a narrative in which they can love themselves more easily. It does also give kids the chance to deal in facts and to change those facts according to their developmental stage as they struggle to answer the master question, which is, why did this happen to me? You know, the adults who love these kids want to think they can lacquer this over, but you cannot. Okay, we're much better off to equip these foster carers or adoptive parents with skills to help children answer that question, why did this happen to me? It does not happen to most people. For the biological clan, open adoption does ease some of their losses, although they still have to walk their grief all the way to its conclusion. That is necessary. What is amazing is how much pride and dignity I've seen some biological families be able to embrace because they're participating in their child's future, and that's been very awe-inspiring to me. And the permanent carers gain compassion and understanding for the biological family if they are educated, counseled, and supported to do so, and that's again where you're going to come in. If you turn them loose in your general society to try and do that, they won't be able to do it. And they can embrace the dignity of their roles as the second set of parents, or fourth or fifth or 10th, depending on which set of parents they are. Okay, that I've seen that over and over again, a kind of permission or blessing given to the adopting parents by the people who own it to give, which are the biological relatives.
I guess the only thing that you said that is different for us is we, and correct me if I'm wrong, you experts, but we don't do adoption of children in kin placements. Our kind of court system doesn't do that. We would almost certainly make a guardianship order, and I think that the thinking behind that is the sort of genealogical mess up the distortion, if you like. But other than that, great.